Hello, welcome. Thanks for coming. I'm Tony, Anthony, and I want to talk a little bit today about how we did Vertica at AmeriPride and use a Tableau on top of that, and tell a little bit about the story we went with on that. So here's kind of where I'm going to hit. I'm going to talk about really the who, the vision we had, talk about the process, why we picked Vertica, as well as then how did we go into using Tableau, right? And then talk about, so what do we get out of all this? So the who, that's me. I led a number of teams. I've been with uniform services through AmeriPride and now as a division or a part of Aramark uniform for about 20 years. I've done a lot of different things, as you see, from reporting, process engineering, software engineering, hardware, data centers. So I've touched a lot of things over my time. I graduated the University of Minnesota Duluth. I'll note I have a criminology degree, so you should all be a little bit afraid, right? You don't know what I'm thinking. I'm a technology geek, right? Avid PC gamer. So I have a home lab with NAS system. I've got 12 or 13 terabytes there. I run Proxmox, which is a hypervisor, as well as Plex server, which is a media server, both recording and playing back. I'm also an MMO gamer. I do Guild Wars 2 and Star Citizen, and I made two big ones today. For those of you that don't know, Star Citizen has been in development since 2012. I was right in at the beginning, so big MMO gamer. There's my LinkedIn in case anyone has questions later. They want to contact me and ask anything more about what's happening or what I did. Who's AmeriPride Services? So we were established in 1889 in Lincoln, Nebraska. As you can see, we had some wagons. There's actually originally a push cart. I didn't have a picture of the push cart. We progressed to what you see today driving around. We're headquartered in Minnetonka, Minnesota. We have 115 facilities in the US and Canada, and we serve 150,000 customers daily. We were acquired by Aramark in January of 2018, hence our new Aramark trucks that you'll see starting to roll out. We dream, we do, right? The new Aramark. So as we stepped into it, we look back, and one of the most important things you have to have when you're doing things like this is you have to have a vision. You have to have something on the mountainside that you're all tracking towards. So our vision was to transform our data into trusted insight and competitive advantage, right? So I think you heard a lot of that today during the keynote, some very similar themes around this. Know at a glance how you're doing, right? So you can focus on doing your job, have more time to delight the customer, and really do this through simplified visual interactions. And when I say that, it's the old saying about pictures are worth 1,000 words, so you can convey so much more information visually, and we can interpret it visually much quicker than we can through all of our spreadsheets and rows and columns with a picture, right? Standard metrics, so everybody gets the same swing. So everyone knows what they're going after, they know the calculations, they know how these things are done. Insight delivered. No decoder ring. So today what you'll find, and what we had found, is that a lot of people calculate things differently. So everyone has their little formula, everyone has their Excel spreadsheet, they do something just a little different. You all get back together and you talk about, what is revenue today? And you all get a little different answer, right? What does revenue mean to you? How many routes do you have? How many visits do you make? How many customers do we have? Some of these really basic questions, totally different. Being able to deliver that, right? And really close to that is certified data, right? No assembly required. So instead of having to go pull data, assemble it, determine what your rules are and put it out, this is all in one place where you can just go grab it. It's all certified, ready to go, no assembly required. The last piece we looked at was any device, anytime access. So one of the things they said is we want to enable people. We want to push this out as close to the edge, as close to the customer as we can. So any device, anytime access. Oh, sorry. One of the things that we came up with, simplify, standardize, and automate. 3 words. that even today resonate throughout the teams as I talk to people, and I will say, here's what we do. Every time we touch something, echoes throughout, we will simplify it, we will standardize it so we can automate it. And I think that applies really well throughout not just IT world, but business process. So as we engage back with the business and talk about this, these are the 3 words I ask people to remember. SSA, simplify, standardize, and automate. So none of this is easy, right? It's not turning a switch, it's definitely a process. So starting our story out, and this is probably similar to what you see in a lot of companies, we went through and we started to apply technology. So we had a lot of foundational things we did around infrastructure, right? We improved our data center, we improved our networks because you have a lot of data that now needs to move around that we didn't have to before. We automated plant systems. We've deployed handheld devices, again, getting closer to the customers. We did telematics, routing systems out with our fleets to help be more efficient, drive more safely. We included daily plant operations to monitor equipment utilization and personnel productivity. With all of these things, then we could start to do some of the transformational work around taking care of our customers. So we have a program called Complete Customer Care, C3, where we do service quality checks, product quality checks, timeliness checks, fair pricing is enabled. So by pulling these foundational pieces together, we start to get insights into these customer-related pieces. We added a customer portal with, to ease payments. Again, kind of coming back to that, let's make it easier to do business with the customer. Easy service changes. We allowed 24/7 interactions. We added customer e-stores, again, for easy ordering, customized product offerings, employee direct billing, 24/7. So again, moving towards the customer, enabling that customer experience. All of these things enabled by the foundational pieces you build. So again, it's a process, right? You have to build one and the other. But this all comes, and again, I'm sure you've all seen this, data overload. So all of these systems have data moving all over the place. So you've got data everywhere. And I like the needle in the haystack is kind of what I was going for here with all the hay bales, but it's really wagons of hay, and you're trying to figure out which one of these bales even has your little pin, your little needle. So, data for everyone. I said, hey, business users, come get your data. Here it is, a big pile. So as the business users came out, we have various business groups like sales and operations and marketing, fleet, legal, finance, service, and probably a myriad of others. We get these guys going here and looking at this piece and going, hey, I know what this is. This is Spear, right? We get these guys looking up here. Hey, I got a fan. Over here, oh, look, we got a rope, right? So these are all these guys looking at things differently. Hey, we got a tree over here. Found a wall. Hey, look, I got a snake. Right? These are all your different business units looking at it with their little silos, saying, these are the business rules that are important to me. This is what happens when you step back and you go, what do we really have here? Right? So dangerous conclusions come from that siloing of the business, not talking across, not having that common certified data layer and business rules that you've come to. So transforming the business. How do we do this, right? What are some of the key elements? Again, it's a process. So it's very, very important that we drive alignment, that common shared vision. We need to get business process, IT, and the business definitions aligned so everybody is on that same page. Again, we're all playing off the same rule book. So, like I said here, aligning technology, standard definitions, and standard processes to deliver a common shared vision. Governing that alignment by bringing together business leadership, analytics leaders, and IT. So instead of having our silos, we have groups together that we can talk about these and come up with the common definitions and call sales revenue, not just revenue, right? The message is important. So as you drive through these, think about the messaging you're doing in your organizations and what that means, and are there ways you can tie this? So the example I use is at AmeriPride, we had people you can count on. That was our tagline for our business. So we tagged onto it and said, you know what? As we do this, we do data you can count on. So try to tie these things together and make little nuances to bring together the business, things they know, together with the new data concepts. Another way to look at it is one team. We had a one team concept, one truth. So you can play off of some of these common concepts, these common themes that you already have in the business, and again, to drive that alignment. So now we are tied together, we are aligned with the business to deliver these things. So why did we pick Vertica? So there's a pretty good story around this, and the director of infrastructure at the time came to me and said, you know what, I've got this really cool product. We've been having all kinds of problems with data loads. We had a particular data load that took 36 hours. We were trying to do this over a weekend, and of course it's pretty tight, and so anytime anything went wrong, it would roll into Monday, and you know how Mondays are. Everyone freaks out when the data's not ready. So we engaged with Vertica. He said, I've got this product. I need you to talk to these guys. I think we can solve this. We engaged with Vertica. We took that same load and we brought it down to 15 minutes. So that was an eye-opener for us. We hadn't seen performance like this. We're just like, wow. And we just did this on a little tiny VM we spun up, and so it makes your data fast, right? The licensing model is what's the real key, is what I've learned here, is that it allows us to scale up or out with minimal cost compared to other big names. So a lot of the big names, they charge you by processor. They get really picky about VMs and trying to run them in those VM clusters and pinning the CPUs. Here, the licensing is all by the amount of data. So you are not tied to that. You can say, I want huge processing, I want a lot of machines. It's just hardware costs at that point. The other thing I looked at is analytics at scale. So some of the future-looking possibilities, we wanted to be able to do analytics and apply models at the full scale. So a lot of what you'll get is you'll pull data out, you'll run like a 10% against it and say, oh, here's a model I've got, and then you'll run that model back against things. This allows you to do that without the model, without the 10%. You run that and test that against all of your data. That's a big difference. Machine learning was another forward-looking platform. The built-in machine learning algorithms they've got, they can be used to analyze and highlight data patterns emerging from your data. So as I looked at it, it was a platform that not only solved today's problem, but then started to give me possibilities for tomorrow and the next day. So it was a great platform to not only grow, but then expand and change into different parts, different sophistication levels for our data. So we went into Vertica and we said, hey, we had a really great proof. Let's do a real proof of concept. Let's really get out here and test this against our data. And we learned this. Vertica's not magic, right? It looked like magic. We were like 36 hours to 15 minutes. That's magic. Yeah, it's not really magic. It's very different from traditional relational databases. Some of the key concepts that came away on our lessons learned, segmentation and sort order are key things that if you're going to the Vertica world, you want to track. Those are keywords you're going to want to be taking a look at. And what this affects is the internode communication and some of the ways it balances data. But segmentation and sort order is important. Whoops, uh-oh. There we go. Sorry about that. Eliminate big table joins. So one of the things it doesn't do well, big table joins. So you have to be a little bit careful about this. And again, this comes back to it's not a relational database, so it's meant to make things differently. So you have to architect for this. And I'll show you an example of where we came to in just a second. Concurrency, we learned about concurrency, resource pools the hard way. We ran one thread, things were great. We ran 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 out of the box, things were horrible. We didn't take the time to learn about concurrency, resource pools. Super simple setting, we changed it and away we were going again. Testing and monitoring, we struggled a little bit on how to do testing and monitoring around the system. It was just newer. We have a lot of established tools that can tell you about relational databases and how they're performing. We didn't have the structure when we first got into it to really tell us a lot about this. So we had no real visibility into what was happening. Some things we learned about Tableau query design. Aggregate tables are important when dealing with Vertica and Tableau. Push down to Vertica, we had to enable some flags to make sure it was pushing that down, so the processing power was, instead of occurring in the Tableau layer, it was actually pushing it back to the database to process and do the heavy lifting. So finding the right balance there was one of the key things. We had to go back and look at what we were doing and where we were doing it. Again, eliminate big table joins. I think that's going to be a common theme throughout, right? So really look at your joins, plan those out, make sure you're doing what you need to be doing. And then we learned some things we were trying to do in Tableau, and this kind of goes back a little bit to the push down. Some things just belong in the database, right? You really just shouldn't do them at scale in Tableau. Now with the new engine that they introduced 2 years ago, I think it was, we've been able to do more in Tableau than we could before. But again, I think good design says you want to build, you want to explore, and then you want to push it down to the database layer. One other thing that we found out was ask Vertica for help early and often. They're really responsive. They have a lot of good answers and a lot of good folks. They were able to come out in a week and help us out solving all these problems. So some of it was even over the phone. They came in person. I mean, they were great. And their online documentation was also really great to see, right? Not everybody has that easily available. So if you're out there, even today and interested, go poke around. There's a lot of great online documentation talking about it and is really helpful. So it's nice that they're forthcoming. So we had a couple iterations of this. And in the appendix that I've got, and I think they'll be providing the slides, you can see the diagrams, and I'm only going to show one of them, but there are the other two that go with these various stages if you're interested. But we did kind of a second iteration. So we're on kind of our second design. And again, this just underscored the need to plan for joins, right? So joins need to be planned for. So if the sort order and hashing are out of alignment, you get what's called global resegmentation across the nodes. And what that means is you're moving all the data through the network across the nodes so that it equalizes. That's not a good thing. That's not optimal. You get hit with a lot of performance issues there. Performance penalties. Change data capture joins were extremely painful and slow to get to the flat marks. So whenever we were doing our CDCs, those are those big joins we were talking about, that we needed to find a better plan for that. It was still killing us. Large data sets, and this is what everyone hears, and you guys have probably heard it a lot, is really driving us towards ELT, which just means we need to land the data and transform it in the database, not transform on the way out or the way in. So really ELT is where things are driving. You'll hear that a lot from Snowflake as well as other sets, so it's not just here, but it's kind of across the board, industry-wide. VMs and shared storage. The story there, we started in the VM world and the shared storage world, and we had a lot of issues, right? So the ease of administration kind of draws you in, and everybody wants to make it easier to do this or click this button or click. That for us was not worth the price of admission for this particular product. So the performance price was just too high. We might be able to do it again, and we've got plans to approach that in the future and try another and see where we're at. Projection sprawl. So projections are kind of like, I liken them to a materialized view in some ways. They're not, it's more sophisticated than that, but just real simple terminology. It's really materializing a certain view, a certain sort order of your data. So as you create these to make performance better, if you don't manage them, you get like urban sprawl, projection sprawl. So you get projections all over the place that may or may not be usable. We had a big issue with that at the time. And that was driven a lot by Tableau and the interaction with, and all of the ability of the Tableau users to kind of slice and dice the data caused us a lot of issue. How do we predict what they're going to do? Right? It's really hard. We don't know what they're doing tomorrow unless you really script what they're doing. But if you do that, you take away some of that ability of interactive data. So how do we do that, right? So we had to create a large number of those to support that. The other piece, when we were still on the VM, we had to create a large number of them just because of the VM limitations, that inter-node communication problems that we were having. And data churn. The reporting layer and the dimension, so every time the dimension attributes changed, we had to repropagate throughout, and then that would cause data churn, and as that churned, we'd have to re-equalize across all the nodes again. So again, causing that node communication. And that had to do with deleting and inserting. We learned some new things about how not to do that way. In the end, we ended up punting, and we just threw hardware at this. We said, okay, we're done with the VM world. We're going to throw hardware at this, and we're going to make this work right. So we went to Vertica. We said, what kind of hardware should we run this on? They gave us a recommendation. That's also in the appendix area. So if we have a little time, I can run through some of those and show you really what that node looks like. But it's a 3-node cluster is what we ended up with. This is kind of our final diagram and where we sit today as far as how we source our data and what we do in Vertica and what we have there from staging and dimensions and fact tables. The biggest thing here is as we talk about minimizing joins, we're combining the stage tables so that when we get further down, we have less joins to do. So it's really doing some of the joins earlier so that we have less to do later. And then looking at some of the table structure pieces, and I'm looking up here and I'm looking at, this is too small for me, but so the projections, the sorting, hashing, and partitioning, really you've got to look at that and evaluate that at all of these different levels and make sure that what you're doing makes sense and that the performance is happening. The data architecture here is really directly tied to your ETL architecture. And that's another learning we had, I probably should have had on another slide, is that as your ETL teams or ELT teams are working on these things, they need to be really hand in hand with your data architects so that this design and the ETL design actually mesh. So originally we had the two teams a little bit siloed, and that led to some design issues and performance issues down the road. So it's really just kind of a reminder, hey, get the teams together, talk about your plans, and plan it out together. Let's see, what else would we say? So we then put marts, so the data marts, right, for all your key attributes and measures were in here, and we call them mega tables, mega fact, mega dimension. We combined all these things. And then with the reporting layer then, we created different, essentially just, I would say flat tables for lack of a better term for each of these, and that is kind of how we drove the performance. So that's where we sit today with it. We've got plans for what I'll call version 4 that we're diagramming out, and again, taking lessons learned from this to move it forward once more. So how does Tableau figure into all this? Oh. Hey, this isn't the newest one I uploaded, but that's all right. We'll make this work. Striking the balance, right? Freedom. Probably recognize that, freedom, right? The Scottish uprising there. Business enablement. And balancing that against IT's need for order. Right? So IT likes it to be a very ordered thing. We need to do it X, Y, Z. It needs to look just like this every time. We know the business can't live like that. So how do we do this? How do we strike that balance? And that's really all around IT governance and structure, right? How do we apply that without stifling the business, the freedom of business enablement? So when we bring freedom and order together, we enable the business power users by establishing a community of practice. We had weekly office hours with resident Tableau experts available so we could work hand in hand with the business. Bi-weekly hosted training sessions and quarterly showcases where we would get all of our power users together with the IT developers, and sometimes we'd have execs who would come in and do judging and really share those vizzes as we came up with them. And it really drove, I think, a lot of that intercommunication and brought the two pieces together. Really freedom meeting order, right? Coordination and alignment, governance and standardization. So we put guardrails around there to say, okay, we get it. You need to develop these things. You need to have a little bit of freedom. But when we go to publish them, we've got some guidelines we need to use, right? So they need to look a certain way. We need to kind of understand what the data is, pieces like that. So really adding some guardrails around it, not strict, you can only do it this way, but guardrails to kind of, let's contain this. And there was a review process for publication around that control and proliferation. So you could create what you wanted within your department, but when you created something that was enterprise or organizationally wide that everyone would look at, that's when we needed to step in and start doing more of the proofing to understand, hey, what is this really here? Do we understand it well? That led us to know we needed a sandbox for the analytics world. So that was I guess a kind of a realization. They were trying to run things against production and causing production issues. They needed production data, but when we allowed them to run in the production area, it caused issues. So we had to create a new copy of production, and we just called it the sandbox, that they could go play. So again, we had to give them a little more freedom than what we're used to, but allowed them a lot more creativity and the ability to kind of play in there and understand things without impacting the production data. The other thing, and I've got a couple examples too of the robust usage and monitoring that Tableau provides, and you've seen some of those new features that they're coming up with, the data catalog as well, but the ability to monitor and see who's running what, when, and how often. Great thing to see, and it works well not just for us, but for the business people who are sponsoring these programs and trying to gauge adoption throughout the enterprise. So part of what we did with the data trust is we created different looks. And I don't know, does this have a, there we go. So we had different business looks for people to know how trusted was this data, right? So we have a last update, and so these were all built in templates. And just kind of giving a relative indication of how well could we trust this data. Now, they had a really cool piece of the data catalog earlier today, and I think it's really great they have it and the ability to click and see it. But what we found is a lot of people, if you didn't have this front and center for certain audiences, they're not going to click to go see it and read it. They want to be able to, again, visualization, at a glance, I want to know, can I trust this data or not? So our green up here was really about information team created, supported, governance approved, right? 100% certified data, and it's a source of truth. So they knew when they saw green that that's gone through quite the process, a very rigorous process, a review. The business people, the execs, all agreed on what that meant. So the yellow one then, we said that's information team created and supported. It's data that the IT information team understands and agrees is generally pretty darn good. So you can trust it a fair ways, right? So trusted but non-certified. We get it, we know what it is, we've identified it. And then we get these power user ones that can be read, and they're really the business user created. They're using non-certified data. They could be using weather data, they could be using zip codes, I mean, whatever they've got, things we don't understand or that haven't gone through our governance process. So that, again, that freedom, right? This is where we kind of introduce that freedom and put it in the order, is that they in here can do that, and it can be directionally accurate, but people will know at a glance, hey, wait a minute, if I'm going to make any critical business decisions, I'm going to want to ask some more questions, right? How do I know if I can trust the data? So this is an example. Really, the picture is how we scaled. So we started, I guess I think this is 6 months ago, if I remember correctly. And so you see we continue to grow users. Okay, it doesn't work. So we're scaling pretty good with this. And then there's some other tips there that we talk about. As we see this scaling, it allows us to do a number of things. Prioritizing the user base by business area. And some of that you'll see on the next slide too, the ability to identify, again, within Tableau, who's using what when, right? So we can establish priorities. Some of this comes from governance, some of this comes from actual usage. Establish key relationships with the business. So by saying, hey, look, we've got adoption going on. We've got people out in the business that are using this. You don't have to guess anymore. It changes the conversations about what we're doing and who those key people are, right? They kind of come to the forefront. They come out, hey, this is great. We're doing good. You can see that. Identifying power users, another key to scaling under control. You have to be able to identify and classify who those power users are. They're most likely going to be kind of your data stewards potentially, or they might be the people who work directly with your data stewards. The training on best practice, right? So again, this is the guardrail approach. It's like, hey, we can show you what some of the best practices are. Let's get together. Let's encourage you to go to the tugs, right? There's tons of great ideas at the tugs as well. So we've got a huge community of people that we can use to help with best practice and training. Delivering compelling solutions. This is one of those things where they come back, let's review it. Let's make sure that it's not just a bunch of numbers, that we didn't do a data viz that's Excel on Tableau, right? Let's make it compelling. What does it tell us? How does it drive us to action? Customize some of these views of activity for each business audience. So we can say for fleet, this is the activity we see on the programs we put in place for you. For finance, here's what we've got for you. And we can show them who's using it, when they're using it, and how often they're using it. Offering up the side-by-side development, again, for critical exec reporting, pairing IT with the business and working together on these items so that we are not throwing it over the fence. We'll go develop something and we'll get that done. Collaboration, right? Tackle the analytical use cases again together, collaborate. Don't just throw it over the fence and run with it and come back. This is a great example of the order monitoring, and this again is a stock Tableau, seeing who's doing what when. I look at this thing all the time. So again, it can tell me the programs, who's running what when. So I can go back to the business and say, yep, you've got huge adoption or you don't. And then we can go back and work with them and collaborate and figure out what's going on and why. So what? So what did we get out of all this? So our Vertica implementation, we actually won an award, which is kind of cool. First one I've ever gotten from Nucleus Research. And it was a 2018 ROI award winner. And I don't know all their math that they go through for this. We gave them a bunch of data. They came back and said, hey, you guys did a really great job. And it's cost benefit, 155, 1 to 5.5, and I think it's like 419% ROI. It's a lot. It was an insignificant amount of resource for a significant return on the business. And this was part of a much larger program or a series of programs. So I carved out pieces of that revenue for this. But it's still cool though, right? What did we get for our investment? Our ability to quickly iterate through analytic scenarios in our sandbox and then take action at scale have really enabled a lot of programs around growth, guidance, using margin, using pricing to guide reactions and what we do. We had a lot of shine the light and they will come, Hawthorne effect. So as people saw this visualization, saw the ability to track and respond to the data, other groups that weren't even on the programs yet, outside of the pilot, started to react. And you could see the data, we just hadn't shared it with them yet. They were actually doing things to correct before they even got on the program fully, just by hearing about their peers. Business trust was a big deliverable, right? So we delivered an actionable product that provided them ROI. They could see it, they could feel it, the people in the field responded to it, and the financials responded to it. And it contributed to a 3% uptick in our revenue. So the ROI at the end of 3 years was 1.5x. And again, I didn't double dip. I carved out chunks of overall programs. I said, I'll take this many dollars. You guys can still have your 80%. So it was really, really successful. And I know this is a little compressed. I had to kind of fit it down into time. And there's some appendix slides you can download and look at that I didn't talk to that have some more detail. Hopefully this was great and you enjoyed this session and learned something, at least a few little tidbits, if nothing else. That's what I love when I come here is I get, 5, 6, half a dozen different things, and I go, I'm gonna use that, I'm gonna use that. If that's all you get, I'll be super happy with that. So if you've got other questions, you see me around, ask. I'm on LinkedIn, I had that up there too. Please fill out your surveys. And there's my LinkedIn again if you need me. Feel free to ping me with questions. I appreciate you guys coming, and have a great time at Tableau. Thank you.